So analytical test procedures are integrated part of the product life cycle, and there could be chance of having the new analytical test procedure in the place based onto the requirement. So in case if the new test procedure gets developed at analytical research site, finally this method has to be transferred and used at the quality control site. And for that reason, the analytical method transfer is required. Essentially, we are transferring the technology associated with the analytical method for that specific product. It is very important to understand what kind of precautions one has to take and what are the different strategies available to complete the analytical method transfer. Hello and welcome. This is Bhaskar Napte from Pharma Growth Hub, and I am on the mission to help pharma professionals to get absolute clarity on various technical aspects, just like this one. So, if you are struggling with technical aspect, or you are struggling with your career growth and would like to build an extraordinary career for yourself, join the Pharma Growth Hub today. To know more about services of the Pharma Growth Hub, join the WhatsApp group of the Pharma Growth Hub by using the link given in the description. So what are the method transfer strategies available? And I'm also referring to USP General Chapter 1224. So these are the four various strategies possible when we think about analytical method transfer. The first one is comparative transfer, and this is the most used strategy. The second can be co-validation. This also can be used. The third one is complete or partial revalidation. And the fourth one is transfer waiver. That means you need not to transfer the method for particular reason. So we will talk about all these strategies one by one. Let us talk about what are the prerequisites when someone talks about analytical method transfer. And these are the prerequisites. One must have the pre-approved method transfer protocol. One must have the signed approved test procedure. One must have the test samples. One must also have the predetermined acceptance criteria for each and every parameter as a part of your method transfer activity. And then there must be a acceptable variability. So these are the five prerequisites when it comes to a method transfer. So the method transfer protocol should include these many parameters. So in case you are preparing the method transfer protocol, you must think about minimum this point. The objective must be clear, the scope of the activity must be well defined, the key personnel and the responsibilities must be well described inside the protocol. Experimental design and acceptance criteria for analytical method transfer is very important. You cannot miss on this very important point. Analysis of a product should also be part of your method transfer. Arrangement for keeping the retained sample or the reference standards, working standards that have been used must be in the place. And finally, the conclusion, including the sign off for the approval of the method transfer report or protocol, is very essential. Another important point could be a deviation. So, for some reason, if the same method cannot be transferred on the another side, you must have a place for certain deviations, making sure that those deviations are not impacting onto the method's performance. Let us now start our first strategy discussion on the very first strategy, that is the comparative transfer. And this is one of the most used, widely used strategy when it comes to a analytical method transfer. So by looking at the term itself, you can realize that there is comparison of result going to happen. So between what the results are going to be compared between the transfer unit and the receiving unit. So the both the sites will perform the same experiment by using same sample, right? And then the results will be comparable. Result will be compared, and if the results are comparable, then you can say that okay, now this there is no significant difference in the result, and hence the receiving lab can be qualified to perform the testing according to the given test procedure. So this is the overall essential of comparative transfer. So what is required for comparative method transfer? You need to have a number of samples for the experimentations. So how many samples will be prepared? It must be well described inside the protocol. Whether there are six determinations going to happen, whether there are duplicate determination going to happen. So all those details must be well explained. So I've seen most of the times in case of assay related substances, people always go with the six preparations so that they can also determine the repeatability within the six observations. They can calculate the percent RSD for the six determinations, and also the average value of transferring unit and the receiving unit can be compared. So this is an example. So difference for assay between transferring unit and receiving unit is not more than 2%. You can have your own acceptance criteria based on to the test under transfer. So for related substances, you may have some wide acceptance criteria. Let us say the difference between the individual impurity is not more than 15% between the transfer unit and receiving unit. Like that, you can describe the limit. It is also acceptable to have the acceptance criteria other than the comparison. So there will be no comparison made between two labs, that is transferring unit and the receiving units, but you will only confirm, at the receiving unit side, certain parameters are within the acceptance criteria. And for example, the recovery. So if the recovery is measured for the spiked sample in case of related substances, and let us say your limit is 85 to 115%, and if the receiving unit percent recovery for impurity is in between this unit limit 85 to 115, then you can also say that now the receiving unit is qualified to conduct this testing. So the comparative transfer can be have two different acceptance criteria. I mean, they can have the acceptance criteria in two different ways. One can be just compare the differences, and the second can be not now the comparison, but just to understand the, let us say, recovery part at the receiving lab. Now third point is very important. So meeting the predetermined acceptance criteria is necessary to assure that the receiving unit is qualified to run the procedure. Unless and until this acceptance criteria gets met, you supposed to not conduct any kind of testing at the receiving unit. The second type is co-validation. Co means what? Together. Validating the same procedure together. So who generally validate the test procedure in your case? If it is analytical research team, then some of the parameters can also be performed by the quality control team. So you will say we are co-validating the test procedure. So the transferring unit can involve the receiving unit in an inter-laboratory co-validation, including them as a part of the validation team at the transferring unit and thereby obtaining the data for the assessment of reproducibility. So essentially, you are trying to understand if method precision is conducted at the research lab and if the ruggedness is repeated at the receiving lab, we call this as a reproducibility. We may prepare six samples, and out of these six samples, you may calculate the percent RSD for six individual preparations at receiving lab, at transferring lab, and then you may also calculate the cumulative percent RSD for 12 determinations. This is how the co-validation can be used to conduct the method transfer. So what is the advantage of conducting the method transformation by co-validation route? You are going to save some amount of time of your validation also. But it is also a good idea to include at least LOQ confirmation, specificity, not including force degradation, and the accuracy at the receiving unit. It is very important because these three parameters are also going to determine whether the instrument used at the receiving unit is really capable of having the required sensitivity or not. So I strongly recommend that you must perform the LOQ. LOQ determination is not required, but you just confirm if the transferring unit says that LOQ is 0.05%. Just inject the solution of 0.05% of your impurities and calculate the signal to noise ratio and understand whether you are getting the required acceptance criteria or not. Specificity is required because you must also understand if there is a placebo in place for drug products. Make sure that the pattern of the placebo at the transferring unit, maybe your research lab and your quality control lab, is one and the same. Because there may be, mention into the STP that you disregard the peak due to placebo eluting at a retention time 10.1 minute, something like that. So you also need to confirm, whether you are able to reproduce those placebo peaks in the similar way. And accuracy is also going to give a confidence to the team that yes, whatever extraction techniques, equipment that you are using, they are performing as required, and that is the additional confidence the quality control team can get. Now, this assessment is made using a pre-approved transfer protocol or validation protocol. So sometimes you need not to have the separate transfer protocol in case of co-validation. You will make the validation protocol as a single activity, and as a part of the same protocol you can mention that look here now, these are the number of parameters will be performed at the receiving unit. So the one protocol can suffice the requirement. In case if you do not want to have this approach, you can have the two protocols made. One is for validation and another one is for transfer. Complete or partial validation. So in case if you are conducting the complete validation at quality control lab for the same method, then why there is a need to conduct the method transfer? Absolutely no need. Or even if you are conducting the revalidation or the partial validation, then there is no necessity to conduct the method transfer. So revalidation or partial revalidation is another acceptable approach for transfer of validated test procedure. Generally, specificity excluding force degradation, right? Precision, LOQ for arrays, of course, and accuracy can be considered for partial validation. So, what parameters you are generally going to consider? So, you can think about these parameters. I think I forgot one important parameter, and that is about, yeah, I think I have that. Precision is already included. I was thinking, oh my God, I missed the precision. No, but it is there. So, think about these four parameters: specificity, precision, LOQ, and accuracy. And the partial validation, you must also have the acceptance criteria in line with the original validation or the maybe stringent than that. See, if it is complete validation, then there is no point of having the different acceptance criteria. But let us assume that you are conducting the method transfer with the partial validation. So if your originating lab has already validated the method, and if they say, okay, now the acceptance criteria for precision is not more than 2% in case of assay, you must also keep the acceptance criteria for precision as not more than 2%. And in case if you want to have stringent, you can have more less than 2%, but certainly not greater than 2. I hope you understand the third point. And when the transfer waiver is possible, means you need not to conduct the method transfer. So according to the ICH, not ICH, but USP General Chapter 1224, you can also opt method transfer waiver. So the following can be the situations wherein the transfer of analytical method can be waived off. The new product's composition is comparable to that of an existing product, and a receiving unit already has experience of test procedure. Let us say you are in the process of revamping your product, right? there is a new formulation in the place, but when you look at the old and new formulation, you find that okay, now there is no much difference. There is just a deletion of one excipient, or there are similar kind of excipient present into the old product, but now the quantities of those excipient inside the new product is just changed. So there is no great difference in terms of composition of the new and old formulation. In that case, as you have experience of analyzing the product for the old formulation, you can have the transfer waiver. The analytical procedure is described in the monograph, and verification is carried out by your lab itself. You are at the quality control unit, receiving lab, and you have verified this monograph test procedure. So what is the great need of analytical method transfer then? Because as a part of verification, your team has got experience. You concluded that this test procedure is also can be run in quality control unit, and hence you need not to have the method transfer. The analytical procedure to be transferred is the same as or very similar to a procedure already in use. Now, this is the case where, let us say, the similar kind of analytical test procedure is used for multiple parameters. For example, assay, content uniformity, blend assay, blend uniformity. So you can have the method transfer done for assay, right? Assay for a tablet. And then as the content uniformity, there are same chromatographic conditions, the same way of preparation of the standard and sample, then content uniformity method transfer can be waived off. Same can be also considered for blend assay or blend uniformity. I hope you understand when the method transfer waiver can be opt. Now the last point is mentioned into the USP General Chapter 1224, and I'm not much into this point. I am not much convinced with this point, but as it is part of the USP General Chapter 1224, I would like to leave this with you. So you can decide on to taking the transfer waiver for the last point that is highlighted into the complete red color. The personnel in charge of the product development, validation, or routine analysis at the transferring unit are moved to the receiving unit. What the chapter says that in case if the person who has developed, validated the test procedure at the research unit, now that person has been transferred to the quality control unit. That means the knowledge of the method is already been transferred along with the person into the quality control unit. So what is the need of transferring the method? But my point here is, you are not just transferring the knowledge, but you are also understanding the setup. You are also understanding where the instrument and equipment available at quality control lab are suitable for this particular method. Environment is suitable for the method or not. So there can be some other issues, even though the same method performs the activity at quality control unit. So for that reason, I am not convinced with the last point. So you take this information with a pinch of salt, and thank you so much for watching this video. Bye bye.